الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وعملا يا رب العالمين. أما بعد. The book that we're currently going through and that we're studying together is a book written by a great scholar by the name of Imam Izzuddin ibn Abdul Salam. And essentially, the book is 17 points that the author mentions, and each one of those points is a benefit that we can actually take from going through difficulty in life. And I know, that's not usually how we think about difficulties. That's not usually how we think about the tests that we go through in life. We think of tests as negative things to avoid, things that we want to end as soon as possible. The Imam authored the book, he called it Fawaidul Balwa wal Mihan, which translates to the benefits of tribulation and tests. And his claim is that there are certain benefits that you can only acquire in life through difficulty. That's a tough one. It's a tough one because it forces us to shift our way of thinking about difficulties. Typically, we think anything negative is bad and evil, and anything pleasurable is good. That's a very hedonistic way of thinking about it. The idea of pain and pleasure being the moral compass. Whatever's pleasurable is good, whatever's painful is not good. That's a very simplistic way, though. Our religion teaches us that's not the case. And I think even in psychology, if you reflect on how many things that are ultimately like good for us and the outcome, the process is is difficult. Much of what we've accomplished in our lives, like major accomplishments, came through difficulty. The late nights studying for exams, all-nighters drinking Red Bulls, right? The long du'as, Ya Allah, I didn't study, but I'm about to Bismillah this exam. Ya Allah, help me, right? Like that's the stress. I talk about this. I'll never forget this one classmate of mine showing up, jittering. Like she drank that many cups of coffee in prep for the exam that she was jittering. And that was a mental health class, like a psychology. I was like, I don't know if that's good for your mental health. Like, you know what I mean? Like physiologically, you just failed the exam, right? Physiologically. But subhanAllah, we stress. But we're willing to go through it because we think in the long run it's beneficial. And you can't acquire that certification without going through the difficulty. And so there are many things like that in life. And so the author highlights 17 benefits. We've covered 5. We've now reached the 6th, inshallah, and we aim to cover that tonight. The author says, السادسة الحلم عمن صدرت عنه المصيبة. He says the 6th benefit you gain by going through difficulty in life is you develop what's called hilm. Ha, lam, and mim. Hilm. And specifically he says, hilm in relation to the one who is the cause of the problem. So sometimes in life you go through pain that's out of your control and out of anybody's control. So someone passing away is not in our control, and it's not in the control of our family, it's not in the control of the doctors. Allah makes the decision when someone should leave the world. That's not necessarily where you would exhibit the hilm he's talking about here. That's more you would exhibit sabr. And I'll explain what hilm means, because you might be like, dude, you haven't explained what hilm is to begin with. And I'll explain the difference though. I'll translate the word hilm as forbearance. And some of you are like, well, that word needs a translation. And I know, so we're gonna break it down, inshallah. Okay? Hilm, he's talking about hilm in relation to humans. Because humans sometimes are the source of your distress. Humans can be the source of your distress. Think about some of the friendships you had, right? And how those friendships fell apart. Think about, do we have parents here? Yeah, if you're a parent, sometimes your kids cause you distress. My kids today, do you know what they're fighting over? They were fighting over who gets to leave the house first. Like the two of them were standing in front of the door, and my son pushed my daughter because he wanted to go out the door first. I was like, subhanallah. Like my logical brain's like, what do you get from just stepping out of the house first, right? And when I asked him about it, right, I said, like, why would you do that? Like, what do you accomplish? I'm trying to walk him through the logic of it. I'm like, what do you accomplish by leaving the house first? You're still going to get in the car, and the car is going to move at the same time. Like, no, it doesn't matter. And wallahi, he said this. He goes, yeah, it's not that important. I was like, so like, why would you do it? Like, ajib, but, and then my daughter, mashallah, she really cried to make it known that I'm in pain, And at one point I wanted to say, like, look, I know it hurt, but like, you're kind of embellishing this, right? But then you sound very insensitive too. So I was like, okay, like, you're okay now. It was, mashallah. It happens a lot, guys. For those of you your first time at Wijhah, it happens a lot when you show up here and I start venting to you guys. So like, you offer me therapy. Do you understand? This is all under the guise of like doing a spiritual program. I just need people to understand my pain. But humans can be a source of distress. They can be. They can cause you to become upset. And in the face of that, that's where you need to display this quality called hilm. And that's actually, right there, we learn a lot. The general point we learn here is you only learn to develop good character when people mistreat you. When people mistreat you. So, if someone's really nice to you, there is some good character to develop there. That's what? Will you exhibit gratitude? So someone's really nice to you, so the challenge, the test, or what Allah wants from you in that situation is, this person's being very kind, very nice. I should be thankful, and I should say thank you. I really appreciate it. Jazakumullah khair, right? I should say that. And I think a lot of us, we were brought up like that. How many of you had this happen to you at least once where your parent made it clear? Say thank you. We say thank you in this, How many of y'all had that happen? Right? Where you just took something from someone? Really? This not universal? Dude, it's universal. Like, come on now. Or you had to say Jazakumullah khair. That one? Even though it was like a non-Muslim and you're like, what do they get about Jazakumullah khair, right? But to say thank you. We're taught this, and it's not that difficult, generally speaking. I think we see it as a virtue, so we try to do it. I think we can all agree it's far more difficult when someone says something or does something to hold your tongue or to hold your fingers from sending that message, right? When you like type it out and the person's like seeing typing, and then you just like, nah, I can't do it. So you delete it all and you send like, sounds good. They're like, all that typing and sounds good? Right? You're like, you don't want to know what we had typed up before this. It's very hard. It's really difficult because a part of you itches. Right? So you want to say it to the person and you can't. Or you choose not to, mashallah. But then what? You need catharsis. So you call your friend, right? Let me tell you what they said, right? And then you kind of backbite. So you didn't really exhibit good character. Because although you didn't say it to the person, which would have been obviously maybe offensive, but you said it behind their back to somebody else. What is hilm? Hilm is forbearance, where you're able to, and some scholars make this difference. There's patience and forbearance. Sabr and hilm. Sabr Sabr, which we translate as patience, involves any difficulty that comes to you that you don't complain about God regarding it. You don't say, God, why would you do this to me? It's not pleasant, but you say, it's from Allah, it hurts, but it's from Allah and I won't complain. That's patience. Forbearance is when you could actually do something about it. So someone says something to you, you could say 10 things back to them, and you choose not to. That's hilm. That's forbearance. And hilm is one of the names of Allah. Al-Halim. Al-Halim. The one who is forbearing. Why? Because how often do we disobey Allah? And Allah, in the moment, could punish us. He chooses not to. He chooses not to. You don't think it's offensive to Him when we do things and we say certain things? You don't think it's disrespectful? It is. Yet Allah is Al-Halim. He overlooks. Maybe they'll repent. Maybe they'll ask for forgiveness. He overlooks. That's Al-Halim. That's Hilm. Can we, in a human capacity, demonstrate that? The Prophet ﷺ teaches us in a hadith, he says, إِنَّمَا الْعِلْمِ بِالتَّعَلُّمِ. He says, you acquire knowledge through learning. وَإِنَّمَا الْحِلْمِ بِالتَّحَلُّمِ. But you also learn hilm through making an effort to demonstrate forbearance. So the word here he uses is, they rhyme, ta'allum and tahallum. This is from a verb form in Arabic. Arabic students, verb form 5, which has a meaning to do something in a way that involves making sacrifice and going through difficulties. So ta'allum, learning, is not easy. Learning something is not easy, especially if you're trying to become really good at it. It takes a lot of focus, a lot of time sacrifice. I can't hang out. I have a midterm tomorrow. I can't do this. I need to focus on my studies, right? We can't attend any family functions, right, guys? It's the rule, because I have studies and I have my midterms and exams, right? That's the rule. Isn't that the unspoken rule we all have? Avoid all the family functions through what? Through my studies. Of course, right? We won't talk about. They're like, some of you are like, yo, don't say that on camera, man. Like, what if my mom watches this and then she'll know, right? No, I'm just joking. But you get what I'm saying? That we, when it came to learning, it was difficult. And learning is not on the day you graduate. Learning is all throughout the process, the day in, the day out, the week to week, the sacrifices, all the effort you put in to learn, all that. That's ta'allum. Tahallum is similar. You don't develop hilm and forbearance overnight. It's something you're going to try to do, you're going to mess up. You're going to try to hold it in, you're like, oh, I held it in. And then they say something more, and you're like, oh, I can't do it anymore. Boom, right? You speak out. Or like, today I'm going to be a really peaceful person. And then you meet that person. That person that you like haven't seen in a while, but the moment you saw them, you just lost it, right? It's like ruined your day. No hilm happening then. And you feel guilty. But then sometimes we give up, and that's our mistake, is we give up on trying to demonstrate that good character. Tahallum, the Prophet ﷺ is telling us, tahallum. You have to repeatedly keep trying to exhibit that characteristic of, in the face of someone really, being unkind to you, to be forbearing. You have to keep trying. Now, the Prophet ﷺ told this to one man on one occasion. It's a hadith in Sahih Muslim. A whole group of people, like a delegation from a tribe of Abdul, they're called. They came to the Prophet ﷺ, and they were really excited because they were coming to learn about Islam. So when they reached, they just dropped, like they came on camels and stuff. They just left their camels, left their belongings, and they came rushing in the masjid to meet the Prophet ﷺ. They had a leader with them. Their leader by the name of Al-Ashaj. Al-Ashaj ibn Abdul Qais. This man, what he did was, he stopped, got off, tied his camel, tied the rest of the camels of his people, gathered all the belongings, put them on one side, one corner. Like he really kind of cleaned up, even though he was very excited to come meet the Prophet ﷺ. And then he came towards the Prophet ﷺ. When the Prophet met him, he told him, he said, "Oh Ashaj, you have two qualities that are really beloved to Allah." He said, "Al-hilm," which is you're very forbearing, "wal-anat," and you're very deliberate, meaning you're not hasty. Because what did Al-Ashaj do? Essentially, Al-Ashaj, instead of rushing in with his people, he pulled back. And he said, "You know what? I could actually get mad at all my people and be like, yo, what are you doing? Like, I'm supposed to clean up after you?" But that's not what he did. He was a leader. And he demonstrated leadership qualities. Sometimes he's like, you know what? My people are excited. They're not even thinking. So he didn't get upset. He said, okay, I'll just take care of this. And then he didn't rush. He took his time, thought about like, hey, what's the right behavior right now? I'm going to meet the Prophet. And to them, the Prophet was everything, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was everything. So they were like so excited. But he said, no, the right thing to do in this situation is put everything down, tie it up, put it aside, and then, in a dignified way, go and meet the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that's what he did. And the Prophet told him, you have these two amazing qualities. Now, how often, if you think about it, do we make these mistakes? Because the two are connected. The two are connected. Your ability to be like very hasty and reactive, that's going to take away from your ability to demonstrate forbearance, is it not? How often is it that we say something that we regret later on? How many of you had your parents tell you when you were growing up, you need to think before you speak? Any of y'all had that? Thank you to like the 6 people who admitted this. The rest of y'all, mashallah, were like Halim from day one. So, I mean, I respect to you, mashallah. But like me, man, my parents were like, think before you speak, think before you speak, right? Because I was a very hasty person in that regard. Especially if you get excited. You know when you get excited with something? You know what's crazy now, guys? I see it all in my son. Does the same thing. So he's so excited about something, he forgets like what's the right way to do it. So that one day he got excited. He wanted to go and see something. He just rushed past his sister, knocked her over. You're like this. Some of you are like, there's a pattern to this, right? Like no. Like he genuinely didn't even realize. He's just like boom, bolted, and then she was just coming out of the kitchen and just bumped into her. And obviously he stopped and he was like, oh, I did the wrong thing. But he's like, I want to see what's on the phone, like the picture, and came running. Then I had to like sit him down. And I said exactly what my parents would say. Think before you go and do something, right? SubhanAllah, how many mistakes, how many relationships might we still have if we weren't so reactive? If we weren't so reactive. If we didn't just speak from our emotions. We paused. And to do that, we're going to talk a little bit about this down the line, inshallah, a little bit later. But to do that, we have to become people who are self-aware, who are aware of what we're feeling, aware of the person I might meet. So look, you're going to that family function. You're going to meet that uncle. You know, that uncle who always has something to say about your education and how you're not in engineering or law like his daughter or son. Do you know what I'm talking about? That uncle, mashallah, right? Who always wants to make comments about your health, right? You're looking very healthy. I mean, you know what that means, right? You know what I'm talking about? Like you have some family members, and and sometimes we don't even want to go to the gathering for that. We don't even want to go for that reason. You know what's crazy? Imagine, especially if you have to go. Look, if you have to go, here's something to think about. this is an opportunity for me to develop forbearance. Because you're not going to develop forbearance with your best friend. Because you're going to you will like them. You will like being around them. You will enjoy their company. There's no forbearance being developed. Forbearance is literally with those people that you don't like. That's what the scholars tell us. They say that every difficulty that you encounter in dealing with someone is an opportunity to work on your character. And that's where there's benefit in dealing with a real like variety and like different types of people. Think about if any of you are in fields where you're forced to deal with like people from all different walks of life, you learn this. You learn this. How many of y'all have experienced this in your field or in something that you do in your life? You'll meet this person, you will not like something about them. You'll just be like, oh, this person. You know when they're like in your calendar, they're like, oh, okay, right? You're not looking forward to that. But that's your chance. Can you learn to be kind, gentle? Can you overlook some things you know they're going to say? Can you do it? It's an opportunity. Really, think about that. It's an opportunity. How many of you have maybe like you have to do some walking because maybe you drive, park somewhere, and they have to walk to your office? Anyone do that? Or like just have to do some physical exercise that they don't really have a choice about? Walking up a set of stairs. And how many of you have framed it in your own mind? You know what? It's a great exercise. How many of y'all have done that? Where you framed it in a good way. Like, you know what? It's not fun, it's cold, but it's good exercise. You take it as an opportunity to grow. It's not pleasant, but by framing it as an opportunity to grow, you don't completely like hate it and detest it. You're like, okay, there's still some benefit to it. Imagine that was your attitude in dealing with people that you don't see eye to eye with. And you will not always see eye to eye with people. The solution is not to just avoid them. That's not the solution. The solution is to come and sit and hear them out. And sometimes, subhanAllah, if you listen long enough, you'll hear their pain underneath. There's a lot of people who aren't the most polite in their daily lives because they're in a lot of pain. And so life has not been easy for them. And as a result, sometimes they're a little rude. And I'm not justifying it. I'm just saying, when you hear the story behind the individual, you become a lot more empathetic and compassionate. You realize, it's difficult. Sure, they could choose to try to be positive, but in their shoes, it's just a lot more easy to just, lean into their pain. So, if we think about it, there's so many opportunities we have in the encounters that we have to work on this quality of hilm. Abu Hatim, one of the great scholars of the past, he said, لو كان للحلم أبوان لكان أحدهما العقل والآخر الصمت. He said, if hilm had parents, and this is a metaphor, if hilm had parents, then one parent would be intelligence and the other one would be silence. Meaning what? It's these two things that give rise and birth to hilm. How do you guys think intelligence and understanding factors into being a person who's forbearing? How do you think that's the case? Anyone want to share their thoughts on how that might be the case? Yeah. Knowing when to bite your tongue. Yeah, knowing when to do it. Absolutely. Some of us, how many of you have gotten into an argument only to, in retrospect, realize they weren't even open to the convo to begin with? I don't even know I wasted my time. They weren't even trying to understand. Any of y'all ever did that? Where afterwards you were like, I wasted my time. Like, they weren't even trying to understand. It was just they were trying to agitate me. Anyone? Yeah. And you regret it. So if you know, like, you have to try to gauge, is this person genuinely, like, engaging with me here? Like, they want to learn? Or do they just want to fight about something? That's why I don't typically engage, or actually I never. Engage in comment sections. I'm not going to ask you to put your hand up if you do, because we're not trying to like embarrass nobody. But like some of us, we engage. Some of us get triggered. And we get so triggered we can't like not leave a comment. And then we just boost the person that we disagree with. That's what rage baiting is, isn't it? So, knowing when to bite your tongue, intelligence, absolutely. What else? Something I mentioned earlier. Knowing when to anticipate negative interactions and preparing yourself mentally for them. You know, Marcus Aurelius in his Meditations, right at the beginning, he says, and he was like a Roman general. He writes, he's like, and he's talking to himself because that's his diary. His meditations it was his diary basically. He says, when I wake up in the morning, I go out, I leave my house, or I go out into society expecting everybody to be extremely rude, to be very uncivilized, to not be courteous, like just to be very, very annoying. That's what he says. So he lowers his expectations so that when he encounters someone like that, it doesn't catch him off guard. Do you know what I'm talking about? If you anticipate something, it doesn't shock you. You're not like taken aback, like what just happened, right? So like, you know when you go to Brampton, as soon as you get off the highway, like the 410, like you better be ready for some crazy driving, right? Anticipate it. I don't know if anyone from Brampton's here. If you are, then forgive me, but just know that it's a common occurrence here at Wijhah, right? That and the farmlands of Guelph, mashallah. Those are our two favorite places to pick on, alhamdulillah. So yeah, intelligence. Intelligence gives rise, because you need to be able to discern when should I engage, when should I not. Sometimes it's worth it. Someone wants to learn, absolutely, share with them. If they don't, just don't bother. All right? And that brings us to the second point, silence. Silence. That gives rise to forbearance. Why? Because forbearance often involves silence. Literally biting your tongue and like not opening your mouth to say, I'm not going to say anything. I really want to say something, but I won't. The author now quotes two verses of Quran, both relating to the Prophet Ibrahim. The first one is about Ibrahim, the Prophet Ibrahim himself. Allah says, Inna Ibrahima la'awwahun halim. Indeed, the Prophet Abraham was, number one, awwah. Awwah is someone who has like a really soft heart. Halim is very forbearing. And there's a connection there too. If you're hard-hearted, you cannot really be forbearing. Why? Because how are you going to hold your tongue? You're going to be offended. You're not going to feel any sympathy or compassion for them. That's usually one of the ways that we're able to hold our tongue, is you almost feel bad for them. You ever seen someone in so much pain that they said things they didn't mean? You ever seen that? They said things, they just lashed out. They were in so much pain. And if you know they're in pain, hopefully you were able to go, it's okay, don't say anything, it's fine. They're just really, really upset. Let it go. Do you get what I'm saying? And I really want to encourage you guys to reflect on this point here. The importance of being aware of what you're feeling, but also trying to understand other people. Because otherwise, what ends up happening, and I know some of us say, I'll never do that. It's not enough to have good intentions. You know, maybe you see certain behaviors from people who are older than you in your life. They could be relatives. They could be immediate family. And you look at them and you're like, you're 40 years old, you're 50 years old, you're a full-grown adult, but you're behaving childish. And we tell ourselves we'll never do that because we have this intention. I don't want to do that. I've seen how it looks. A mere intention is not enough. If you don't break the pattern, you will repeat it. It'll come out in a different way maybe, but it will come out. So you have to start to realize your own behaviors. Some of us really do not like when maybe our parents get really upset with us, really angry. And it angers us when they do that. But subhanAllah, many of us have, because of all our pain, we've suppressed a lot of anger ourselves. And given the outlet, we sometimes lash out, doing the very same thing that we hated our parents for. No? It happens. That's why healing is not just through intentions. Oh, inshallah, I will never do what my parents did. That's not enough. I'm sorry, that's not enough. You're going to have to make active effort to undo the impact and to learn more about yourself so that you don't repeat it. So the Prophet Abraham was very soft-hearted. And he was forbearing. Right? Because when you can see someone else's pain, it's so much easier to bear their difficulty or their behavior. And so that's one thing to really think about is how reactive are we? Have you ever, I've seen parents do this. Parents, like these are, again, grown adults, right? And their child will get really upset because children are children. Children literally cannot control themselves at times, literally. Like they don't have the brain development to do that. The prefrontal cortex is not fully developed. So they're very much at the mercy of their emotions and feelings, children. And you'll have a child, I may or may not be speaking from experience, right? Where your child looks at you and says, "You don't love me." What do you do with that? What do you do with it? I've seen parents actually engage. "Excuse me? I don't love you? What about this? What about that?" You're really going to engage the child on that point? Like you're thinking it's like a logical conversation. It's not. The child's in pain. You think the child doesn't know you love them? The child does. But the parent's not cognizant enough to recognize, because the parent's so upset. How could my child say this? Because they're not seeing the child's pain. Right? My daughter, one of her favorite lines, my youngest, she loves saying, "Everybody hates me." It's her classic line, right? Even while I'm holding her and kissing her, and "Everybody hates me." And I'm just like, "Yes, of course. Yeah, sure. I'll keep kissing her. And I'm just like, I'm not going to engage and be like, "How could you say that? I'm hurt. That's offensive." No, now we have two children talking, right? That's not what we're supposed to do. We're meant to develop the understanding and just recognizing this is not the time to engage. They're not speaking from a place of understanding. They're speaking from pain. The Prophet ﷺ, he says in a hadith, and this is related to the idea of hilm and not being reactive. He said, "Inna khayra al-rijal man kana bati' al-ghadab sari' al-rida." May Allah grant us this ability. He said, the best of men, but really this would apply to everybody. The best of men are those who are slow to anger and quick to be appeased. It takes them a long time to get really upset, because they don't become upset easily. He said those are the best of men. Not the ones who go from 0 to 100, boom, in a split second, boom, like a fuse, boom, it's just gone. No. They're able to bear and bear and bear. And even after getting upset, they cool down very quickly. And maybe some of us know such people like that. SubhanAllah. And those are people with hearts of gold, mashallah. And he said, and the worst of men are those who are quick to anger and slow to cool down. And that's not easy. It takes immense self-discipline, self-control, self-awareness, soft-heartedness to be such a person. Okay, I want to just share a few steps on how one might develop hilm, What are some steps? Imam Ibn Hibban, he mentions, he says, hilm, there are certain requirements, ingredients to hilm. He said the first is, and we've talked about this, is intelligence. Because you need to know the harms of reacting, why you shouldn't be overreacting all the time, one. Two, you must have enough self-awareness. You must be aware of your own triggers and your own reactions. And this is so important to do this when you're younger, because if you don't, as you get older, it's almost like you get set in your ways. I often mention this. I remember one person in the community coming to me, married for, I think, close to 20 years. And he was so sad. He said, Shaykh, it was month of Ramadan, I remember this. He said, Shaykh, I keep getting mad at my wife. He's like, I don't know what happens. Like, I just explode. And later on, I feel bad, and I tell myself, man, you shouldn't have done that. Don't do it again. And he goes, I have an intention not to do it, but before I know it, I've just exploded over something. She'll say something, she'll do something, and I'll explode. He's like, how do I stop? Like, he has an intention. He wants to stop. But he's not even aware of what the triggers are. Like, can you imagine walking through life like that? Where you don't even trust yourself? Because it's almost like there's a part of you that's totally out of your control. And you don't know when it's just going to show up. That's scary. I mean, that is concerning. You're walking around not knowing what's going to come out of yourself. Like, we tiptoe around people that are unpredictable, right? Like, we don't know, are they going to explode? Are they going to be in a good mood? We tiptoe around such people. Imagine you are the person. That's tough. How do you have courage going into a marriage? You're like, man, I'm going to get in this marriage, and what if I mess it up? What if my crazy side comes out? Like, well, what if I mess it up? That's something that I think, subhanAllah, as a society, we've really lost the focus on self-development. When in school or any of your university classes did you learn about self-awareness? When did you learn about it? Not once. Not once. And it is arguably one of the most essential characteristics to develop, to have healthy relationships. Because if you're not aware of your behavior, you're not going to be able to understand with depth other people's behavior. Because that's how emotional intelligence works. It's if you want to understand others, you do so through the medium of understanding your own self. And if you are a stranger to yourself, you will not want to sit alone with yourself. Who wants to be alone with a stranger? You know, you're just looking at them and it's just uncomfortable. You get in the elevator. You know the elevator one? You get in the elevator with that one person, and suddenly you're just looking at your calculator, right? Like, oh, our calculator is really interesting. Because you don't want to make eye contact and talk, random person. And you're just praying, God, don't let this elevator get stuck, right? Worst nightmare. Imagine you are the stranger to yourself. You don't understand yourself. You don't understand the behaviors coming. You don't understand why you react the way you react. And many of us are like that. We don't know why we react the way we do. We wish we could change it. What have you mastered if not yourself? Of what use is a PhD if you cannot control yourself? And our society has seemingly lost focus on this. People will graduate after extensive studies and research, not understanding this. So, becoming aware of yourself, number one. Then, actually being patient in moments of difficulty, like holding your tongue, not speaking out. The other ingredient they mention is to be deliberate. Maybe start to slow down in life. That's where our religion teaches us intentionality. Imagine, and I'll give you an example. Imagine you wake up in the morning and you're going to work. And before going to work, you go with the intention. Every single person I'm going to encounter today at work, I am going to be, inshallah, patient with anything negative they say to me. And I'm going to do my best to put a smile on their face. I'm going to intentionally go in with positivity. That would transform the lens you're wearing as you go through your day. And so you're walking and you walk past, that person in the office, and you're like, oh, okay, don't say anything, and but you're aware. You're aware that they might reach out and say something, and if you're aware enough, it won't catch you off guard, and you'll pause. And hopefully in that pause, you'll be able to catch yourself. Viktor Frankl, he makes this point, but really he takes it from the Stoics. He says, look, between every action and reaction is a gap in which you get to choose what your reaction is. One of our mistakes is, children do this. I'll tell my child, why did you do that? He'll say, because let's say, she pushed me. No, that's the motivation. Now, I don't do this with children because they're not able to understand this. But with an adult, you could do this. You could ask them, look, when they pushed you, that's the action. There was a moment where you had a choice whether or not to react in the way that you did. You chose to react that way. It doesn't always feel like that. It doesn't always feel like we have a choice of how to react, but we do. You're not forced to react the way you do. You choose to react that way, even if it's just subconscious. There's a gap. Viktor Frankl talks about it in relation to all life circumstances. Whenever something happens in life, before you react, there's a gap where you get to make a choice. And what I was saying earlier was, as you get older, I feel, Allah knows best, but from what I've observed, I feel like that gap gets smaller and smaller. And if you haven't trained yourself to react in the best way, you might end up reacting in ways that you will regret later on. Can I give you a worst case scenario? I have seen so many people issue divorces out of anger. And they come back, Shaykh, I love my wife. I don't know what happened. It just came out. She did this, and then I just said the words. Nobody gives divorce when they're happy, because that's the excuse. Shaykh, I was mad. Well, what else would you be? Right? That's not an excuse. What else would you be? It was not like it's a good day today and issue a divorce. That's not what people do. What they mean to say is, Shaykh, I was overcome by anger such that I didn't even realize what I was saying. The gap disappeared. You had no self-awareness. And most of those men, if you ask them, when they were getting married, would you ever divorce your wife? They'll say, never. Inshallah, I'll never do it. They had no intention to do it. Where'd it come from? A lack of awareness. See, we pacify ourselves by looking at people who make mistakes and telling ourselves, I'd never do that. And if you're not cognizant and self-aware enough, you will, without even realizing, end up in a position and do the same thing. And that's why it's so important to learn to not be so reactive, to slow down. It's not easy, by the way. That's what tahallum takes, time and effort and just slowing down. That's why we're taught what? Consult. Before making a major decision, consult. Don't rush to react and do something. Someone does something, I'm going to go do this. Wait. Calm down. Go talk to someone you trust. Discuss with them. What's the best course of action? And many of us will have saved relationships, made good decisions because we paused and consulted with someone who kind of, snapped us back to reality and said, listen, you're just being really, really reactive right now. And the last thing the author mentions in terms of an ingredient, Ibn Hibban rather, as an ingredient to forbearance is to be steadfast. Look, if you're not someone who's usually forbearing, the first time you try, you probably fail. I'm not trying to be pessimistic, but I'm just being realistic here. You'll probably mess up. Try it again and again and again until you get to a point. Imam al-Ghazali, he says good character is that which you're able to exhibit with ease. If you have to force yourself, it means it's still a work in progress. You're not really with good character, you're just showing good behavior. But character as like this inherent trait, it's when you're able to do it with ease. Bisuhulatin. And so it doesn't come easy. It doesn't come naturally to everybody to be forbearing. Especially if you're a very passionate person in life. Right? It's wonderful to have passion. It's wonderful to be very extroverted. It's wonderful to be very, engaged in everything you do. But the flip side is sometimes you're reactive. You say and you do things that you later regret. So difficulties in our relationships with others are a training ground for developing this quality of hilm, of being forbearing. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the ability and the tawfiq to use these difficulties that we inevitably face in life and those difficult relationships that we have. May He grant us the ability to use them as a means of bettering ourselves, especially when it comes to forbearance. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallama wa barak ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.